When the news broke, it was just a headline on a financial wire, a trade dispute halfway around the world. Beijing had delivered a financial ultimatum to one of Australia's largest mining companies, BHP. The demand was as simple as it was shocking. Future payments for iron ore, a trade worth tens of billions of dollars, would no longer be settled in the world's currency. They would be settled in the Chinese yuan. To most people, it was just business, a power play between a supplier and its biggest customer. But inside the quiet, secure corridors of the U.S. Treasury Department in Washington, D.C., it was not seen as a news story. It was seen as a signal, a warning shot, fired directly at the heart of American global power. In that moment, alarms went off. Secure phone lines lit up across Washington. Emergency briefings were called in rooms shielded from electronic surveillance, because while the media, the politicians, and the public are focused on aircraft carriers and fighter jets, the real war of the 21st century is being fought in silence. It's a war waged on bank servers, in private boardrooms, and across the invisible networks that control the flow of money around the world. This is not a story about a future conflict. This is a story about a war that is happening right now. Today, we take you inside America's economic war room. We will expose the secret financial arsenal Washington has built to defend its empire. An arsenal more powerful, more pervasive, and more dangerous than you can possibly imagine. The thesis for this investigation is a lethal paradox. To defend the U.S. dollar, America must deploy financial weapons so powerful that their very use risks triggering a global rebellion against its economic leadership. It risks accelerating the collapse of the very system it is trying to save. This is the story of America's counterstrike. The story of how you fight a war when the battlefield is the global economy itself. Inside the economic war room. To understand the battle being waged, you must first understand the battlefield. It's not a physical place you can find on a map. It is a global network of power centered in Washington, D.C., but with tentacles reaching into every financial capital on Earth. The command center is not the Pentagon. It is a series of unassuming offices deep inside the stone walls of the U.S. Department of the Treasury, the marble halls of the Federal Reserve, and the secure server farms of the intelligence community. Here, the maps on the walls don't show troop movements or military installations. They show global capital flows. They track the movement of money from one continent to another in real time. The enemies are not identified by their uniforms, but by their international bank account numbers. Their movements are not tracked by satellites, but by transaction data. And the generals in this new kind of war are not four-star officers. They are accountants, lawyers, and economists. They are quiet bureaucrats who wield the power to bring entire nations to their knees without firing a single shot. For most of the 20th century, American foreign policy ran on a simple, brutal doctrine: military might. If a nation stepped out of line, the response could be measured in destroyers and divisions. Today, that doctrine has been rewritten. A new belief has taken hold in the halls of power. The most efficient way to neutralize a threat is not to bomb its cities, but to freeze its bank accounts. The most effective way to win a war is to make it impossible for your enemy to pay their soldiers. This is the age of financial warfare. The architects of this war are a trinity of powerful institutions. First, and most importantly, is the U.S. Department of the Treasury. Think of it as the strategic command center for this economic war. The Treasury doesn't just manage America's finances. It actively projects American power across the globe. Deep within the Treasury lies a small, obscure, but immensely powerful office, the Office of Foreign Assets Control, better known as OFAC. OFAC is the entity that designs, manages, and enforces America's sanctions programs. It is OFAC that maintains America's financial blacklist, the Specially Designated Nationals and Blocked Persons List, the SDN list. This list, containing tens of thousands of names of individuals, companies, and even entire governments, is one of the most powerful and feared documents in the world. The second pillar of this power structure is the Federal Reserve. On paper, it's America's central bank responsible for managing our money supply and interest rates. But in reality, its power is global. Because the U.S. dollar is the world's primary reserve currency, the Fed is, in effect, the world's central bank. It controls the global supply of dollars. It controls the very oxygen that the international financial system needs to breathe. In a crisis, the Fed can choose to provide that oxygen to its friends, or it can choose to let its enemies suffocate. The third and most secretive pillar is the U.S. intelligence community. The CIA and the National Security Agency, NSA, are no longer just tracking terrorists and spies. They are tracking money. Their powerful surveillance tools are pointed at the global banking system. They are monitoring international transactions, searching for the financial vulnerabilities of America's adversaries. They provide the targeting data for the Treasury's financial strikes. They identify the secret bank accounts, the shell companies, and the hidden assets that allow America's enemies to operate. Together, these three institutions form a new kind of military-industrial complex. It is a complex built not on bombs and bullets, but on banking and bytes. And over the past 2 decades, they have built an arsenal of weapons so sophisticated and so powerful, it has fundamentally changed the nature of global conflict. Decoding the arsenal of the dollar empire. So what are these weapons? How do they actually work in the real world? Let's break down the 3 primary tools in America's economic war room. Weapon number 1. Financial sanctions. From a scalpel to a sledgehammer. This is the most frequently used weapon in the arsenal, wielded by the agents at OFAC. It operates on 3 distinct levels of intensity. Level 1 is the scalpel. These are precision strikes. They are designed to target and neutralize specific individuals who are deemed a threat to U.S. interests. Think of Russian oligarchs, Iranian officials, or Venezuelan politicians. When OFAC adds a name to its SDN list, it becomes illegal for any U.S. person, any U.S. bank, or any U.S. company to do business with them. But the real power of the list is its global reach. Because the U.S. dollar is the operating system of the world, no international bank of any significance is willing to risk being cut off from it. So a bank in London, or Zurich, or Hong Kong will immediately freeze the accounts of a sanctioned individual. They do this not because they are legally obligated to by their own governments, but out of fear of angering the U.S. Treasury. The effect is devastating and immediate. Suddenly, the oligarch's yacht is frozen in a European port, unable to refuel or pay its crew. His private jet is grounded, unable to get insurance or landing rights. His penthouse in Manhattan or his villa in the south of France are seized. He is transformed into a financial ghost, cut off from his wealth and his influence, unable to operate in the modern world. It is a swift and brutal financial execution. Level 2 is the sledgehammer. This is when sanctions are expanded from individuals to target entire sectors of a country's economy. This is a move designed not just to punish, but to cripple. The most prominent example is the sectoral sanctions imposed on Russia after 2014 and dramatically escalated in 2022. These measures targeted Russia's most critical industries, its energy giants like Gazprom and Rosneft, and its largest banks like Sberbank. They were systematically blocked from raising new debt or equity in Western capital markets. They were cut off from the investment and technology they needed to grow and modernize. This is no longer about targeting a single person. It's about strategically starving the economic engine of an entire nation, slowly degrading its ability to function. And then there is level 3, the nuclear option of sanctions. This is the full embargo. This is when the United States declares an entire country a pariah state. Think of Iran, North Korea, or Cuba. Under a full embargo, almost all trade and financial interaction with the target country is made illegal. This is economic warfare in its most brutal form. It is designed to isolate a country so completely that its economy collapses, hoping the resulting chaos and suffering will lead to a change in the regime's behavior or even its overthrow. It's a weapon of immense and terrible power, and it always comes at a staggering human cost. Weapon number 2, swift control, the global off switch. This is one of the most misunderstood and most feared weapons in Washington's arsenal. First, let's be absolutely clear what SWIFT is. It is a cooperative, officially based in Belgium. It doesn't hold any money. It doesn't transfer any funds itself. Think of it as the Gmail for the world's banks. It's a highly secure messaging system that allows over 11,000 financial institutions across more than 200 countries to communicate with each other to authorize payments. If a bank in New York wants to send $1 million to a bank in Tokyo. It uses SWIFT to send the secure message that initiates and confirms that transfer. It is the nervous system of global finance. Technically, SWIFT is neutral. It's governed by a board of its member banks. But in reality, because the US and its European allies represent the most powerful and influential members of that cooperative, they have the ability to exert enormous pressure on SWIFT to comply with their political objectives. Washington does not have a physical off switch in an office, but through diplomacy and the threat of secondary sanctions, it has the power to force SWIFT's hand. We saw this power deployed in 2012. Under intense U.S. pressure, SWIFT made the unprecedented decision to disconnect sanctioned Iranian banks from its network. The effect was immediate. Iran's ability to receive payment for its oil exports and to pay for imported goods was crippled overnight. It was a key factor that eventually brought Iran to the negotiating table over its nuclear program. And we saw this power unleashed again, on an even larger scale in 2022. Following a coordinated push from the United States and the European Union in the days after the invasion of Ukraine, SWIFT announced it was disconnecting major Russian banks. The impact was a financial earthquake. It triggered a run on Russian banks, a collapse in the ruble, and threw Russia's international trade into chaos. The threat of being disconnected from SWIFT is the financial equivalent of a medieval siege. It is a declaration that your country is being cut off from the global economy. It is a weapon designed to isolate and strangle. Weapon number 3, the Treasury and the Fed, the Leviathan. This is the ultimate weapon. It stems from the simple, awesome fact that the United States controls the world's primary reserve currency. This power manifests in two terrifying ways. First is the power to freeze sovereign assets. Because so many countries around the world hold their foreign currency reserves in US dollars, those assets are often held in accounts at the Federal Reserve Bank of New York. And the critical point is this: any asset anywhere in the world that is denominated in US dollars technically falls under US jurisdiction. This gives the US Treasury the shocking and almost unbelievable power to seize the national treasure of other sovereign nations. The most stunning and controversial example of this power came in 2021. After the Taliban took control of Afghanistan, the Biden administration moved to freeze the assets of the Afghan Central Bank, roughly $7 billion, money that belonged to the Afghan people, held in their name at the Federal Reserve Bank in New York. With the stroke of a pen, that money was frozen. The message to the rest of the world was chillingly clear. Your reserves are only truly yours as long as America says they are. The second power is the control over global liquidity. During times of global financial crisis, like the one in 2008 or the market panic of 2020, there is a desperate worldwide scramble for one thing: US dollars. In these moments, the Federal Reserve has a tool called dollar swap lines. These are essentially emergency credit lines extended to a select group of other central banks. These swap lines give them access to a virtually unlimited supply of US dollars to inject into their own banking systems and prevent a catastrophic collapse. But who gets these life-saving swap lines? A small, privileged club of America's closest and most trusted allies: the European Central Bank, the Bank of Japan, the Bank of England, the Bank of Canada. The Fed has the unilateral power to decide which countries get saved and which countries are left to burn. It is the ultimate expression of financial power, the ability to control the global supply of money itself, the ability to act as the world's lender of last resort. The lethal paradox: every shot is a suicide shot. So with an arsenal this powerful, this comprehensive, America should be unbeatable in this new era of conflict. It should be able to dictate terms to the rest of the world, right? Wrong. Because this is where the deadly paradox at the heart of our investigation comes into play. The very act of using these financial weapons is what risks destroying the foundation of American power. Every time Washington pulls the trigger, it doesn't just hit its intended target. It sends a powerful message to every other country on the planet, including its own allies. And that message is: get out of this system before you are next. Look at the chain reaction that has already begun. The constant and expanding use of sanctions has created a boom industry in what experts call sanction proofing. After the first wave of sanctions in 2014, Russia began the painstaking process of building its own domestic financial messaging system, called SPFS, as a direct alternative to SWIFT. At the same time, China was accelerating the development of its own system, CIPS. Today, as reported by Russian and Chinese state media, they are actively working to link these two systems together. They are building the plumbing for a financial channel that is explicitly designed to operate outside the dollar's reach. It's still small, it's still clumsy compared to the Western system, but it's growing every day because every new sanction imposed by Washington is another powerful advertisement for their alternative. The decision to cut Russia off from SWIFT in 2022 was seen in the West as a masterstroke, a demonstration of unity and power. But in capitals from Beijing to New Delhi to Brasilia, it was seen as a terrifying precedent. What was the result? The BRICS nations almost immediately announced they were fast-tracking the development of their own joint payment system, BRICS Pay, and exploring new platforms for trading in their own currencies. They saw what happened to Russia and understood that they desperately needed an escape hatch from a system that could be turned against them at any moment. But the move that truly sent a shockwave through the world's central banks was the freezing of the sovereign reserves of Russia and Afghanistan. That was a crossing of the Rubicon. For decades, U.S. Treasury bonds were considered the safest asset in the world, the bedrock of the global financial system. That single act shattered that perception, and what happened next? According to data from the World Gold Council in the years following 2022, central banks around the world, especially in emerging markets, began buying physical gold at a pace not seen in over 50 years. Why? Because gold is a physical asset. It can be stored in your own vaults. It is not a digital entry in a ledger in New York. It cannot be frozen by a keystroke from the U.S. Treasury. It is the ultimate insurance policy against the weaponization of the dollar. This is a quiet but massive vote of no confidence in the American-led financial order. But perhaps the most corrosive and self-defeating consequence of this financial warfare is the way it alienates America's own allies. This happens through a particularly controversial tool called secondary sanctions. This is when the U.S. government tells a company in a third country, often a key ally like Germany or France, that they must make a choice. You can either do business with the United States or you can do business with our sanctioned target like Iran, but you cannot do both. The most explosive example of this in recent memory was the political war over the Nord Stream 2 gas pipeline. The pipeline was a massive, multi-billion-dollar project to bring Russian natural gas directly to Germany. Washington saw it as a dangerous strategic project that would increase Europe's dependence on Russia. To stop it, the U.S. Congress passed legislation imposing secondary sanctions on the European companies involved in its construction. These were not Russian companies. These were German, Dutch, and Swiss firms. The reaction from Berlin and Brussels was absolute fury. They saw it as an outrageous infringement on their sovereignty. An American attempt to dictate European energy policy and to bully them into buying more expensive American gas. It created deep resentment and fueled a growing call within Europe for strategic autonomy. That is a code word. It's a code word for reducing their dependence on the United States, not just militarily, but financially. This is the lethal paradox, laid bare. To punish its enemies, America ends up punishing its friends, and in doing so, it gives them the powerful motivation to join the search for an alternative to the dollar-based system. Every shot America fires in this economic war blows another hole in the hull of its own ship. The double-edged sword. We are left with a terrifying and unavoidable conclusion. The United States holds the most powerful economic arsenal in human history. But it is a double-edged sword. Every time it is wielded, it demonstrates America's power, but it also erodes the trust that is the ultimate foundation of that power. The dollar's reign as the world's currency was built not just on the size of the U.S. economy, but on a global consensus. A belief that it was a stable, predictable, and relatively neutral system for all to use. The aggressive weaponization of finance over the past 20 years has shattered that consensus. The world that is emerging from this conflict will not be one led by the Chinese yuan or the euro or any single currency. It will be a fractured, multipolar world with competing financial blocks, a world with more friction, more instability, and a greater risk of conflict. And in that world, America will have lost its most valuable and irreplaceable asset, not just its currency's dominance, but its credibility as the anchor of the global system. The sword of the dollar empire is both the tool of its dominance and the instrument of its own potential demise. And while financial sanctions are a powerful tool, there is one weapon in America's arsenal so controversial, so dangerous, it's considered the nuclear option. We expose it in our next investigation. SWIFT, the financial doomsday machine the U.S. is terrified to use. This leaves us with a profound and difficult question about the nature of power itself. A question we now put to you. If using America's financial power to punish rivals also risks harming innocent people and pushing our own allies away, where do we draw the line? Is maintaining global dominance worth the moral and financial cost? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below.